Hello world, my name is Tim Russick and welcome back to another daily game dev video. I'm the developer of a game called Battleborn Tactics, which you can wishlist down below if you're interested in strategy games. Today we're talking about mental models and how they apply to games and what you can do understanding them to kind of make better games, maybe. Now, like I said, I've been super into strategy games, so a lot of stuff I've been talking about lately on the channel has to do with strategy games and kind of how that works, because that's just what I've been immersed in lately. So I want to talk about this concept of a mental model of the system and kind of how it applies to a game. So I want to walk you through a fictional scenario. Okay, you and your buddy, you sit down, you're going to play a new game. Okay, let's say chess. Your buddy's never played chess, you have. So you sit down, you play chess, and you start to teach them how all these pieces move, right? You teach them the pawn first. You move the pawn 2 spaces on the first try and then 1 space after the first move. They start to get it. At that point in the game, that is the entirety of their mental model of the game, right? All they know is these pieces move forward. That's how they understand the system. That's all that they've mapped, right? As you progress on into the game, they start to learn that all these little pieces have their uses, and each time they learn a new thing about the game, they update their mental model of how the game system works and how the rules operate, and then they can make more informed choices. But because chess has so much depth, there's a lot of stuff that is only going to be learned by repetitive playthroughs, right? And and I use chess because it's like a perfectly contained kind of square, small, little, very simple, very clear rule set. But like there's a lot of games that have ambiguous systems, and that makes them harder to form a mental model of, for better or for worse. We'll get into that in a little bit, but the mental model of your game is really, really important because it determines how players operate. And a lot plays into the mental model of your game. In something like chess, chess has no UI, chess has no AI, chess has no, there are games with UI and AI, I'm sure, but it has none of that. So what they're really getting is the pure mental model of how the system works, but they still may not understand a lot of the strategies and kind of what's important. Like, for example, the queen is an extremely powerful unit, right? But some newer players might put the queen in danger just to take a piece. They might prioritize killing over maintaining their queen, right? And they might lose the queen and as a result lose the game because that unit is so important. So like the more that they discover about how these different things work, the more that they update their mental model, and the more that they do that, the better they can play the game, which increases their skill, right? Now I want to talk about games with ambiguous systems, because those games impede your ability to create a mental model of what's happening, and this can be good or bad. So if you take games that use randomness, or games that use ambiguousness, you can get into some tricky situations. I think one of the most famous examples would probably be microtransactions and loot boxes, because there's a big discussion in the loot box world about, like, matter of fact, it's a law in some countries that you have to disclose the odds of a loot box to a player. And the reason that law was passed was because what's perceived by the player when they open a loot box, right? They've got these common and uncommon and rare items. And to them, they think of it like buying a booster pack in a store. They think they open the pack and then it's got X amount of things in it and they have a chance for a rare and so on and so forth. But in reality, what could be happening in a digital game is maybe that company has data that says that if you get a really cool card in your first pack, you're more likely to buy more loot boxes, right? And so they have an ambiguous system behind the scenes that is manipulating how that system works in order to give you an experience that gets you to do what they want. And that's why it gets so complicated, is because the mental model that they're giving you intentionally is different than the actual way the system works. And when that happens, you get disconnects. you get disconnects, and it's especially bad when there's like something to lose, right? It's why a lot of competitive card games and things like that can be drastically different games at the beginner level versus the expert level, because there's an understanding of a mental model that is different at the expert than at the beginner level. I think Yu-Gi-Oh is a perfect example of this. When I first started playing Yu-Gi-Oh, the card game, back before all the crazy synchro summons and XYZ summons and all the crazy shit it is now, back in my day, all right, you had Blue Eyes White Dragon, and if Blue Eyes White Dragon at 3,000 attacked the Dark Magician at 2,500 attack, he got obliterated, all right? And then the other person will lose 500 life points. It was a pure, like, just bigger monster wins, right? That's kind of the basic system. But as you play the game more, and you understand that, okay, Yu-Gi-Oh is different than Magic the Gathering, it's different than Pokemon card game. One of the main things that makes it different is the lack of a resource system. So in Magic the Gathering, you've got mana, right? You have to have these cards in your deck that are called mana, and you have to play them one per turn, and then you have to use them and tap them to actually play creature cards or play spells. And in Pokemon, you have energy, so you have to draw the energy cards, and then you have to attach them to specific Pokemon to power up their attacks. Now, because of these energy systems, they're limited to one per turn, you get this slow growth of possibility space throughout the game, right? On turn one, there's probably only going to be one energy on the table, one mana on the table, outside of like basic card effects and stuff. Turn two, there's probably going to be two. On turn three, there's probably going to be three. And so what that does is it starts you out small, but then the farther the game goes on, the bigger and more epic things become. And it gives you a lot more utility. It gives you a lot more options. You get more powerful creatures out, and it's really, really cool. But when you look at Yu-Gi-Oh, Yu-Gi-Oh doesn't have a resource system. So what ends up happening is the utility that you have, the resources that you have, end up being the cards in your hand. Your cards are your resource in Yu-Gi-Oh. And as a beginner player, I didn't understand that. I didn't get it. My mental model of the game was big monster equals kills, right? Kills equals win. That was my mental model. But as I started playing competitively, as I started going to tournaments, as I started competing in tournaments, I realized that if cards are the resources, right? If literally the only thing stopping you from going on your turn forever is the amount of cards in your hand, right? It's not like that with Pokemon or Magic, right? Like Magic, you play one mana per turn. Pokemon, you play one energy per turn. Yu-Gi-Oh, you play as many cards as you want, as many cards as you can, right? But you just have to have them in your hand. So when I started realizing that the resource was really the cards in your hand, I started to realize that certain cards allowed you to get what's called a +1. So if you could trade one card for two, it doesn't really matter what card that is. Like, obviously, more powerful cards are better, but like, if there's any card ever that could give you a +1, it broke the game. It literally broke the game. And if you, I'm not going to go into a rant on Yu-Gi-Oh now, but if you've been to a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament lately in the last couple of years, the game is broken because of that. Because it has no resource system, and because of power creep over 10 years of Yu-Gi-Oh game, these turns are just stupid ridiculous. You've got people that take 30-minute turns, and it's just like, what the hell is going on? Because there are cards that give you +1, and your resource is the cards. So anyway, that was a long tangent to explain the fact that as you understand the game better, as you have more experience in a game, as you kind of absorb all of this information, you understand things at a deeper level, your model of the system changes. And what you see is different than what someone at a beginner level sees. And so when you're designing a game, you have to be aware of the mental model at any given time, right? And it's one of the reasons why tutorials are a thing, because good tutorials, they take a lot of the complexity from understanding this mental model of this game. They take it away from they don't just drop you in, right? They give you a little piece at a time, because they know, like, at first your mental model is blank, but then you've got a character that you can move. Okay, so now your mental model is, I've got a dude that can move around a field, right? And then they give you a weapon. Okay, now your mental model is, I got to do that move around the field and like I can shoot things. And then they put an enemy in there. You see what I'm saying? So it's like your mental model is evolving at a pace that your brain can keep up with versus there are some strategy games and stuff like this, which I've talked about in the channel before, that just kind of dump you into the world. And sure, there are some people that like those, but generally it's a lot of stuff to take in, and it takes a lot of time. We talked about friction yesterday. There's a lot of friction with adding too much into someone's mental model too quickly. So in a strategy game like I'm making, I'm being very cognizant of the mental model that someone has of the game, and I'm trying my best to not add in things that are misleading about the model, because the problem is when you add in a feature or even a bug that's misleading about how the model works, it can destroy the experience. There are several times where I've made games where I've watched playthroughs and like there's a bug, right? There's just something that just happens in the game that's like not supposed to happen. But usually when it's really bad, like if it's a crazy bug that's just like everybody knows it's a bug, it's not usually a problem, because then they're like, okay, Tim, there was a bug here, you know, and they file a report. But if it's a bug that looks just enough like a feature or just enough like it might be an intended behavior, what it does is it breaks their mental model of the game, and it can disconnect them completely, because now they're like, wait, I thought I understood this thing, but now I don't. And with Battleborn Tactics, one of the things that we've I've kind of experienced with this game specifically is you've got these units that have 2 and 3 range of squares, right? So like the goat, for example, has a 3 range in any direction, which is a big range on a 7x7 board. But what I didn't take into account was like the 3 range, the 3 spaces that you can move, doesn't really care if there are obstacles. You can go right over obstacles, right? But one of the big things in almost every playthrough is that throws people's mental model completely off. Like their model of the game starts with the expectation that someone cannot jump over bushes. And then the second the goat does that, they're like, whoa, 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 what is all this? And a lot of times if it's a bad situation where the goat jumps over a bush and then just like kills their dog or something, like it can cause so much frustration that they end up quitting. So even though I thought that was kind of cool, and I thought it was interesting and a little more, it gave you a little more utility, I took that out. And what I did is I added a flying behavior into the game, so that like owls and birds and like the eagle and stuff like that, they have a flying passive ability, and that just allows them to jump over obstacles. Everyone else cannot go through obstacles like that. And I'm not really sure where I'm at design-wise and what I think about the change, but I can tell you that is never something I would have focused on had I not directly watched it break somebody's mental model of the game. And I'm not saying that you should always necessarily go to what people expect, but by following what people expect, you are building a better mental model quicker in their mind. And the quicker you can do that, the faster you can engage them and keep them interested in playing your game. So like, if the game works the way they expect it to, they're much more likely to play the game more often, because like it makes sense to them. Whereas like something like jumping over the bushes is completely unexpected and they don't understand it. And sure, they can adapt their model, but every time they adapt their model, it causes processing power, right? It's like a currency. If you're spending a currency every time someone has to adapt their model, you want to be careful on how much you spend. You don't just want to blow your whole big budget, right? Like you want to make sure that you can increment it in small chunks so that it's doable by players. Anyway, that's kind of what mental models are, and I would encourage you to, especially if you're making a strategy game, but really to kind of any game where someone has to understand the rules of a system and really have a solid mental model of like what the game is and what and how it plays. I would encourage you to explore mechanics that allow that. Rewind is a great mechanic, like undo move and stuff like that. That's a great little system to just show somebody how something works, right? It lets them experiment and say, hey, I can run up and attack that dude. Oh no, that happened. I didn't expect that to happen. Undo that move, try again. Into the Breach has undo, Invisible Ink has undo. Like a lot of good games that let you experiment are usually good because they help you along with your mental model of things, right? In Philophobia, an example of this would be death, right? Death is designed to teach you stuff. So every time you die, you kind of update your mental model of how the game works. So different games use it differently, but like it's really, really important to keep in mind because it's something that can make or break the engagement of your game. That being said, I want to say thank you to these people right here. They help me keep doing what I'm doing every single day of the week, making video game videos for you. I want to say thank you to these people. If you want your name on this list, you can head over to patreon.com/GameDevUnderground. Lots of cool tools, training, and stuff like that to help you build, finish, and launch better games. But my name is Tim Ruswick, and I'll see you again next week.